This video and all other videos in this series are heavily inspired by both Wendigoon and Lost Explained on YouTube. I highly recommend you check them out if you enjoy content like this, especially Lost Explained. They're both linked in the description. Thefuselage.com. Thefuselage.com was the official Lost fan website, with a popular message board for fans to discuss the show. It was directly run by the creative team behind Lost, and it was even sponsored by J.J. Abrams himself. The website started in 2004, but it sadly met its end in 2019. It's also worth noting that a lot of the theories on this iceberg chart probably come from the Fuselage and other sites like it, hence why information on a few of them are scarce. Of Mice and Men. Of Mice and Men is a John Steinbeck novella about two men named Lenny and George. The themes of the book and the plot are mentioned throughout the show, as Sawyer is a big fan of it, so much so that he even spoils the ending of it to the Man in Black in Season 6, Episode 4, The Substitute, where they get in a scenario that reminds Sawyer of the book.
My favorite Steinbeck, Mice and Men. You know that one?
Nope, a little after my time.
About these two guys, George and Lenny. Lenny's kind of slow, causing George problems. So George walks him out in the woods, tells him to look out yonder and picture the pretty little house they're gonna live in one day. And he shoots Lenny in the back of the head.
Well, that doesn't sound like a happy ending.
Final titles, Mandela Effect. I'm sorry guys, but this one's just a little bit too vague for me to know for certain what it means. My best guess is that it could be referring to a group of people misremembering the series finale's episode to be named something other than just the end, but I really have no idea. If anyone has a guess, feel free to leave a comment and I'll include a fixed version of this entry in the compilation video of all 10 tiers when I get done with the series. DUI reports. It's almost a joke at this point among fans how so many of the actors from Lost have gotten DUIs, so much so that a fan theory was formed about how the characters whose actors got DUIs while on the show were later killed as punishment, though this theory was quickly disproven. The biggest quote-unquote evidence there ever was to this theory was that shortly after Michelle Rodriguez, who portrayed Ana Lucia, and Cynthia Watros, who portrayed Libby, got caught drunk driving in real life, their characters in the show died. However, due to numerous characters dying without their actors getting DUIs, and numerous actors getting DUIs without their characters dying, the theory was quickly debunked. I still find it hilarious, though, that the episode wherein Libby and Ana Lucia die after their DUIs is titled Two for the Road. How fitting. The pilot episode was the most expensive pilot created up until that time. This is a pretty self-explanatory entry, just stating that when the pilot was made, it set the record for the most expensive one. And while now it's normal for a television pilot episode to be extremely expensive, it wasn't a common thing back then, so it was more of a big deal when it happened. Moving on. The island time is out of sync with the rest of the outside world. This is a theory about the island's time being different than that of the outside world. However, this has been disproven, as fans on Lostpedia have counted the on-island days since the plane crashed on September 22nd, 2004, and it lines up perfectly with them leaving the island on January 7th, 2005. The only thing on the island that is not in sync with the outside world in these terms is the time flashes, as the island moves backwards, but the outside world stays normal. However, I still think the theory this entry is referring to is wrong in terms of the current island time being out of sync. Writer's strike in Season 4. Famously, the reason Season 4 has so few episodes is due to the writers of Lost going on strike from November of 2007 to February of 2008, although it's worth mentioning that a lot of people think the show is missing a ton of episodes because of the strike, but in actuality, the episodes were just shifted to the next seasons. The flashbacks are not just a narrative tool, but they are actually memories that the others are somehow able to watch. It's possible, I suppose, that the way the others knew so much about all the main characters was because they were able to somehow watch their pre-island flashbacks. This is a cool idea and all, and I don't think I can find any way to certainly disprove it, but I really don't think this is true, mainly because the others are never shown to be able to see the memories of other people. 4/8/15/16/23/42.com. 4/8/15/16/23/42.com, much like the Fuselage, is a no longer working Lost forum that at one point was very popular. I wish I had more to say here, but I really don't, so I'll go to the next entry. Dalai Lama test. The Dalai Lama, or however you pronounce that, in Buddhism is the head of the Gelig school of Tibetan Buddhism. Various tests are given to the supposed reincarnations of the Dalai Lama to confirm whether or not they truly are the reincarnation. This test is quite similar to the one that Richard Alpert gave to John Locke when he was very young, drawing parallels between the test of a reincarnated Buddhist and the test given to John Locke. I'm going to skip this entry, but if you're curious, it's just referring to a theory that Benjamin Linus is similar to Mary in one specific way. So, yeah. Christian interacted with Vincent. In the aforementioned Lost Mobisodes I talked about in Tier 1, the final mobisode, titled So It Begins, shows the Man in Black taking on the form of Christian Shepherd and interacting with Vincent the dog. What this shows is that the Man in Black, while appearing as someone else, can, in fact, interact with animals, which is interesting, yet we already see him do that in Expose, so it's not that groundbreaking. Lost is mostly Damon Lindelof's project rather than J.J. Abrams. J.J. Abrams himself has stated that he wasn't too involved with the plot of the show past Season 1, and yet people always credit/blame J.J. Abrams for what they like or dislike about Lost. I think the reason is that he's one of the most famous people behind Lost, which makes him a memorable name, but the real genius is Damon Lindelof, along with Carlton Cuse and a few others. In fact, Abrams only directed 2 episodes of the show, those being parts 1 and 2 of the pilot episode. John equals Satan. I presume, based on the earlier entry about Christian Shepherd, that this is not literally referring to the actual John Locke, but rather the Man in Black when taking on the form of Locke. That being said, this is a theory that the Man in Black is Satan himself. I don't believe this theory, however, as it implies that Jacob represents God, but rather I think it's more likely that Jacob is an angel and the Man in Black is a demon, or something like that. The sickness. The sickness is not a physical ailment like the name would lead you to believe, but rather a darkness or evil that infects people on the island and makes them murderous and act differently than they would normally. Throughout the show, we see Saeed and Claire infected with this sickness, to name a few. I would also like to note that I don't know why this isn't on Tier 1. This is, one of the things that is brought up in the show, so it's not like some obscure piece of trivia or obscure fan theory. But anyways. Sawyer hates going by his name James because James is also his father's name. A fan theory about Sawyer is that the reason for his famous disdain of being called James is due to his father also being named James, and the name reminds him of the tragedy that took place in his childhood surrounding his father's murder-suicide. However, this theory starts to fall apart when you watch Season 6, Episode 8, Recon, and see the close-up on the newspaper headline reporting on the murder-suicide, which reveals his father's name to actually be Warren. I still think it's a neat idea, though. Charlie's Church in the Moth, Echo's Australian Church, Desmond's Monastery, and Oxford University in the Constant are all the same location, the Cathedral of St. Andrew in Honolulu. This entry is simply in reference to the filming location of St. Andrew's Cathedral, which is featured in 5 different episodes as 4 different locations. The church can be seen in Season 1, Episode 7, The Moth, Season 2, Episode 21, Season 3, Episode 17, Catch-22, Season 4, Episode 5, The Constant, and Season 5, Episode 3, Jughead. The last 2 being the same in-show location of Oxford University. The Valenzetti equation. This is something I've mentioned in a previous tier when talking about the numbers, but I'll give a more in-depth explanation here. The Valenzetti equation was a large part of the Lost experience, an ARG that helped establish lore that wasn't brought up in the show, but was still considered canon. The equation was figured out by the Hanzo Foundation and predicted when humanity would end. In the Lost Sri Lanka video, Alvar Hanzo talks about how the radio transmitter on the island will broadcast the core numerical values of the equation, those being the famous 4, 8, 15, 16, 23, 42. The Dharma Initiative's goal was to then change those numbers and, in doing so, save humanity. Naveen Andrews, Saeed, has a British accent. Listen to this short interview clip with the actor who plays Saeed. You'll notice his British accent, which his character, Saeed, did not have.
I had exactly the same thoughts as you have. I thought at the beginning we were on track. Like the first season, I'm still proud of.
Dynamite. I was hooked from the first episode.
Yeah, and then around about the end of the second, definitely the third. You know, I think they were winging it.
Yeah.
You know, and I think it's because they didn't have an end in sight.
Cerberus vent. On the blast door map, the words Cerberus vent are seen in several different places, with different numbers next to them. Cerberus is a code name for the smoke monster, named after the mythological dog with 3 heads who stands guard by the gates of hell. This means that throughout the island, there are so-called vents that Cerberus, or the smoke monster, can come out of. It's also quite probable that in the episode Exodus, when John Locke is being dragged into a hole, that hole is actually one of the Cerberus vents. Towerette statue. The Towerette statue is a statue on the island nearby where Jacob lived. The statue depicts the Egyptian mythological goddess of childbirth, Towerette the hippopotamus. And no, I'm not joking about that. This statue would later go on to become just a foot after the Black Rock crashed into it during a storm, as seen in Season 6, Episode 9, Ab Aeterno. And with that, we've reached the end of Tier 2. Again, as soon as this video gets uploaded, I will have already started working on the next part, so stay tuned for that if you're interested in following the rest of this series, and if you want to continue going down the Lost rabbit hole.